Welcome to the North Star podcast. Join Claire Daniels and Pete Mills as we talk about defining your purpose and finding your own North Star. We'll be talking about inspiring stories, career highlights, and celebrating Northern businesses. Thank you for being part of our journey. We hope you enjoy listening.
Welcome back to the North Star podcast. I'm Claire.
I'm Pete.
And we're really grateful to have you joining us for another episode. So hopefully you've been tuned in to some of our most recent episodes that we've been covering over the past few months, where we've been talking about setting goals and manifestation and mindset and everything for the new year. And one of the things that we touched on that we thought we could really delve deeper into was just the general feeling of happiness. And you know, the North Star podcast is all about finding your purpose, and there's been little moments that we keep spotting all over the place, don't we? On LinkedIn, someone using the reference of the North Star, and Stephen Bartlett on a couple of his podcasts, one with Jordan Peterson, they were talking about the North Star, and you know, that definition being your guiding purpose. And actually what a lot of people I'm seeing saying is the purpose should be, the goal in our life should be to be happy. And we kind of mentioned this a little bit, but we thought it would be worth diving deeper into.
Definitely. And you know, one of the things as well, it's becoming a bit of a distant memory now, isn't it? But actually thinking about when we went into that first lockdown, do you remember how LinkedIn was and other social media platforms? Everyone was like understanding and sharing things, and the sort of here's my home life. And what's interesting is as we come out of, you know, we had a little trial run before Christmas of coming out of that and trying to get back to normal. And what does normal look like for a lot of people? Getting back in the car, doing 2 hours a day commuting, racing around. Can you come see me for this meeting in Bristol when you live in Bradford, right? And is there a reason for that?
Talking from experience there, Pete.
Maybe. And actually, this sort of, I think, an opportunity that we had to reset. Have we got away from that in terms of what is going to make us happy? You know, you talked in a previous podcast about the 4-day week, for example. And I look at the Monday to Friday piece, which was effectively came out of the Industrial Revolution, where they wanted control, and you came into work and you clocked in and you clocked out, so that the owner of the factory knew what time you were in and out. And actually, have we gone beyond that? So there's a few things in there, isn't there, to unpick about happiness and how do you achieve that? Yeah,
that reference of lockdown, you know, I think there has been so much discussion around that in terms of, like, I know personally in the first lockdown, we all actually ended up enjoying it because truly we'd never experienced anything like it before. Business did slow down. So then you had to look at where you could find happiness in different places. And I found, especially, it helped that the weather was nice. And I think certainly, you know, that's something that I know I get affected by a lot is the weather. And was actually the lovely weather. I would go at about 4 o'clock every day and go on a 2-3 hour long walk with my dog from my house. And I really love it, so much so that it's high on the criteria of any house we buy now, that we have to be able to do a walk from our doorstep. Don't want to have to drive to a nice, you know, country setting. Need to be able to go on a walk from the doorstep. And I'd go out and do that every day, and that gave me so much like fulfillment and satisfaction. And then life started getting back to normal, and even though these other lockdowns came, we didn't embrace them in the same way. And I actually think you're right, and that really we've probably forgotten all about the lessons that we were taught from that. Because we're so eager. And almost, I remember seeing something about the time, we're eager to go back to how things were rather than to move on to something new, to the new normal. I know that's a bit of a cliche now.
No, not at all.
But yeah, I think there's something in that we can definitely be looking for in terms of like the lessons of, well, what truly, when you strip everything else away, what is it that makes you happy, and what is your purpose? So what does happiness look like to you?
Well, for me, it starts and ends with family, right? So, you know, I've been really lucky in my life that I've got I've got a fantastic brother, and I'm now an uncle to his child, and We've got my daughter and my wife and her family, and I think happiness has always been around the family for me. And growing up, we're all just singing rainbows and dancing around. It was like any other family. We had a family business, and there was stress from time to time. But when I look at my childhood, it was a happy childhood, right? And actually, my teenage years, I had a good group of friends that I still keep in touch with. I was fortunate to go to university. I was the first one in my family to go to university and actually meet people from across different walks of life and develop a core group of friends. And so, I think my happiness is definitely derived from spending time with family and friends, for sure.
Yeah, and that's actually a really lovely picture that you've painted. Obviously, not everyone's fortunate enough to go through that,
no.
But that's okay. We're not saying that people have to have this kind of perfect life, perfect family, perfect friends to be happy. I mean, for me, whilst I've got a great family and got great friends, when I really think about what happiness means, and I think about the times when I feel my happiest, I think happiness for me is freedom. I feel really happy when I'm in big, wide open space in the countryside, out walking my dog, making my own decisions. That makes me really happy.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel happy just driving, and I'm like, I own my car, I've got a nice car, love my car, love that I can choose the music I listen to, and I blare the music that I love full blast, and it really makes me happy. And and happiness of travelling, going places with my husband. Potentially I do find some happiness in the material things, but again, if I really stripping it back, I think it's because it comes back to that freedom of like I can buy what I want. And it's not that I was ever deprived of freedom, and I don't think my happiness derives from anything from childhood, but it's just that when I search for what makes me feel most content,
sure.
And I think really that's what this is all about, isn't it? When we're encouraging people to think about their North Star and what their purpose is. Whilst you may believe your purpose is, even if it's to help others, and you've got very, like aspirations of helping other people, or whether your purpose you believe is to run a multi-million-pound business, there's always a why behind that.
Absolutely.
And a lot of books and research and everything goes into this, like finding your why. I think Simon Sinek does a book, Start With Why, and when you look at that first, like, but why do you want to do that? And I think that's a really interesting discussion topic for this podcast and for our listeners, is like, well, when you think you know what your purpose is, ask yourself why that's your purpose, and what's the deep-rooted feeling around it that you're searching for.
Absolutely. And from a work, on the work side of things, my if you do add us on LinkedIn, I talk about wanting to work with mission-led businesses and founders. So I do aspire to create value. If someone is investing in what I do, or if I'm part of something where they're giving us investment, I have a duty to make sure I turn up every day and I help achieve that. But the happiness point in being around those things is that I'm genuinely involved in work that is going to change people's lives. And a great example with Slingshot, for example, where we became Conservation Circle members, and we're really proud of that. We have our different reasons around why we would want to be part of it, but joined at the hip, I think, on wanting to make a difference in nature and conservation. Yeah. And I threw Slingshot into the hat with their conservation team in America, and I was like,
and this is for Rainforest Trust.
This is for Rainforest Trust. It's pro bono. There's no money about it. It's literally how can they get some profile, maybe working with you guys, but can you guys get some value from what they're trying to do? Because it seems to me like there's a perfect match, and we facilitated that. And honestly, we did a webinar together in September at Leeds Digital Festival, and you can dig it out or find it, or I'll send you the link, where Erin, who's the scientist there, talked about working with Slingshot, and she was like, you've turned what would take hours and days into minutes by using what you do, which means that on the front end, I can help make decisions about how we purchase land with communities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's like bringing it right back. That connection started with me going, I think that there's something there. I'm not quite sure, but I think if you get together, you'll make something happen. I get a lot of happiness from that for sure.
Yeah. And I think, that piece of us both supporting Rainforest Trusts, because the planet does mean a lot to us. And again, you think about that why, and it's like, well, because my emotions are pulled on when I see things like I really care about animals, and that's one of my big drivers in life. And actually, my whole why comes back round to I want to open an animal sanctuary, and that's so far removed from what I'm doing today, CEO of a digital marketing agency. But I'm really skilled at that, and I know I can deliver and do that really well, and I get a lot of joy out of it. But my end goal, I'm not like, I hope I'm still doing that when I'm 60. I'm like, I hope when I'm 60 I've made enough money that I can rescue animals and look after them and just sit on a farm.
You'll be
a non-working farm,
I have no doubt you'll be there.
And neither do I. And I think that's one of the things, we spoke in an earlier episode about manifestation, and that's one of the key things is you can't doubt for a second that you're actually going to get where you're going to go, because as soon as you doubt it, you may as well forget about it. And so you have to be really focused on believing that you'll get there, but you also have to have gratitude for the here and now. And I think that it's kind of that tie-in between gratitude and happiness, because it's going, you'll never be happy if you're always thinking about the next thing. To find happiness, you need to be present.
100%.
And then to be present, you need to be grateful for the things you have now, instead of I wish I had something different. I wish, whatever it is.
Absolutely. No, and we've all been guilty of that at times. And I look around now, and I think, I'd like to do this. We've got plans, as we've shared in a previous episode, for our businesses this year. What do we want to do? There's hiring, there's bringing people in, and da-da-da-da-da. But, while we were setting up this and we were just having a moment before we went on camera, I was just swapping messages with someone I work with at Crisp, and a little nice update of what she's achieved today, and it made me smile. I'm like, great, amazing. And it's like, that is something which 2 years ago, I wasn't that happy, right? Because how could I be happy of coming out of that exit and then going, where do I go next? And I think that's something to think about. And
with you saying there about with a member of your team, something I say to my team is my reward is seeing you all do well. And one thing that I think is, I don't believe there's any form of true altruism that exists, because if you're doing something so much for someone else, you feel good from it. So even if you didn't go into it with the aim to feel good, you come away and that is your reward from doing something for others.
Absolutely.
So I think so much happiness can be gained from helping other people.
And you know what, Claire, just stepping into your office before this and seeing the guys, and I see them periodically, but it's real. It's real energy. They clearly all care about each other. There's work going on. It's not, you've not just created a college atmosphere where it is focused, but it's equally, have a moment. Let's just have a light-hearted moment together. I get a bit of banter about what I'm usually wearing, but it's I like it because it's real, and then I can take a bit of fun, and it's like, you've created a fantastic culture there, and I can see why that would make you happy. And so looking at that, we're lucky. Well, are we lucky? Because we've defined it, right? And I think that's something, if you're listening to this and going, well, that's easy for you to say because you run your own business or you do whatever. But I think it's important, and we chatted about this outside, didn't we, before starting this episode, was actually what we're not showing here when we mention those stories is the 5 years, the 6 years, the 7 years before it to get to this point. The decisions I had to make 2 or 3 years ago that I knew would be really painful, but actually to enable the next part of my career and life. And you had some with Trio, didn't you, where you joined Trio, but you're now the owner of Trio, but that journey, that's really interesting, wasn't it? How did you tackle some of those things?
Well, do you know what? I think...
Because you can't have been happy.
No,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So I wasn't happy, and I had to force myself through an uncomfortable situation to get to the point of happiness. But then realising that happiness is kind of nothing to do with this. And, I think happiness really comes from within. And the importance to me around talking about it, going back to something you just said there, the years before, is actually, I know this now and I'm starting to learn, and what I would love is for someone to have told me when I was in my early 20s to focus on being happy rather than focusing on all these other things. I'm still only 32, and it's a really lovely position to be in, to go, well, actually, just focus on happy, like what does happiness mean to you?
100%.
And that can be your purpose. When we talk so frequently about finding your purpose, and a lot of this in the podcast is definitely more steered towards a work and career element, because we're both business people, but it really can boil down to something as simple as that. And I think it was Stephen Bartlett on his podcast that said, the North Star of life is to be happy. Yeah. And so, you start breaking down, well, what does happiness look like? And, going into those examples, what for you, like I would love to kind of list out for people like some of our nuggets of what makes us happy, to really inspire people. It doesn't have to be a big thing. And whilst I do get a lot of joy out of work, and actually, like, I was looking forward to coming back to work after the Christmas break, because work is where I'm happy. And I've said it to one of my friends before. I was like, I feel my truest self at work. So that's where I like to be. I don't really have a desire to switch off from it, because that's who I am. I get a lot of joy out of it. Right? And you're not gonna.
I can totally see that. And actually, you, from what I see from the outside, you do find those moments for yourself, but equally you are very focused on where you're driving the business, but you're not killing people by where you want to be. You're enabling them to drive it, and that's exactly how it should be, right? It should be you giving the enablements of going, well, do you know what, if you want to work with London clients, why don't you research a list of London clients and see if you can get some clients? Like, that's what you do, isn't it? And the happiness of seeing that come together and being proud, and it's really cool.
And one of the things that actually I've noticed more and more that makes me unhappy is, like, when it comes to the weekend, if I've done a load of plans that have been kind of put upon me, so like, oh, well, it's this person's birthday, then it's that, and then this family member wants to meet up, and this, even if I could enjoy all of those things, that gives me a sense of unhappiness, because I didn't have the freedom to choose how my weekend looked, and I didn't get to do the things I would like to do. And so I've become so self-aware of those things, and it's about understanding that and then knowing what to say no to. And so for you, Pete, like, what are those things for you? A selection of even just little things that you go, this is what makes me happy.
So one of the things in work, for example, is when I have, coming up to 40, maybe a year and a half to go, but we're coming up to 40, and it's like, I feel like now, I've established myself, who I am. I know where I want to take things, and I know the scenarios of work and circumstances and ideas where I work the best. And so an example about, and to make sure that I practice what I preach, right? So I was introduced to a couple that run a very successful business, and they'd got some ideas to build a new thing out of it. Met them, had a couple of conversations. They came over to my office a couple of times, and we spent time, some chunky amounts of time together. And then one of them was like, we need to pay some money. I was like, no, you don't need to pay me any money, because what we're doing here is we're finding out whether we can work together. And actually, for what is really in reality maybe a day of time or 2 days of time, that's well worth it. So let's just do that.
Yeah.
Because we'll build trust with each other, and then when we go, I've signed a dotted line, we've had a little practice period, and it gives you a chance to see my values and my value, and I get to see how mission-led you truly are and where you want to take this thing and how serious you are.
Yeah.
It's working brilliantly. It's fantastic.
I love that.
Where it's gone like a little bit awry was at the beginning of my new journey, exiting Calls 9. I did what probably a lot of people would do in that situation. I said yes. I'll do that. Found myself in an advertising agency in London. I was working as I was shadowing a CEO of a law firm, a national law firm, where I was trying on different things, going, is this where I'm going to focus my career? We're going to scale up this business. And as I peeled it back in those scenarios, the people I was working with didn't share the same values. And I was like, do you know what? I've learned now from my past, and actually what makes me happy is not driving to Hull for a consultancy fee.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend my time on that situation. And you've got to work hard to find the ones that you do, but when you do, you hold on to them and you put the effort in.
And I love that phrase of like your values and your value. And I think that's a really great place to think about when people are thinking about happiness, is like, am I valued? Like, do people see my value? And then aligning your life to your personal values. And probably not a lot of people will spend time really thinking about what are my values. And that's certainly something that I've done and thought about over recent years. Like, what are the values that I stand by? And like, something I value really highly, for example, is loyalty. And it's something that, I mean, that's part of, I'm a Taurus, apparently it's part of like my star sign. But I definitely bring that in work. That's a value that I see all through my life. Like in work, I'm so focused on wanting to get really committed people who support the vision. And then at home, in family life, I'll give 100% loyalty, and my friends I'm really loyal to. And when you live your life by your values, I definitely think that's gives you space for happiness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in terms of other things that bring you happiness and joy, then what else? Surely your daughter, your fur babies.
I'm really, I am, I use the word blessed. I am truly blessed in my personal life with family. We have some challenges like any other family. My dad's not well, but equally, I'm blessed with the time I have had him there in our lives. And I think with my daughter now, and that feeling of responsibility around her is makes you, it just completely like levels you up in. But then when we got the dog, not comparing a baby and a dog, but when we got the dog, it was like you're helping this sentinel being sort of come together, and you're responsible, and it's interesting, isn't it? That I was saying on an earlier podcast that I can't do it. I'm not going to make out that I do it 7 days a week, but I try as much as possible to do the breakfast with my daughter, so that I'm always present. And I think if I can continue doing that for me is happiness. I'm smiling about thinking tomorrow morning. In fact, I'm thinking on the way back from here, I need to get my chocolate wheats because I've run out.
So you've got your breakfast ready.
Chocolate wheat, frosted wheats and choco wheats. The minute they're the favourite for me. She's too young for them. She just has milk and porridge. But no, I get a lot of happiness from that. And we had a little cat scare last week. One of the cats wasn't well, and I think you recognise that you can sometimes let these things just pass you by. Just enjoy the moment.
100%. And I have that, and like I'm a fellow cat and dog owner, and you just, I think sometimes people with pets will understand. People without pets, you don't know what you're missing out on. Because I think like can be really underrated, the actual joy you can get from those animals. And like I often on my Saturday dog walks, that's when I spend time thinking about joy, because I could just be walking along and to see the happy little face of my dog running towards me, and I'm like, you have brought the most joy into my life. there's nothing negative about you. I mean, obviously I appreciate some people, if they have a dog, it could be hard work or whatever. I'm like, there is nothing bad about you in my life. Like, it's not difficult looking after you. You're a joy. Like, I'll just look and I'll smile, and I'm walking along on my own and I truly smile and feel that happiness within. And I mentioned on another episode of, you know, when you're thinking about the mindset and thinking of the life that you want to have, but being grateful for what you have now. So I kind of say to myself, this is the feeling of having it all. And I take the joy that I get from that and go, what more could I possibly want in this moment? Yeah. And when you can tap into that and really start recognizing what those things are, I think that makes you like all powerful. Yeah. When you know truly the things that make you happy and you go seek out more of it, and you start saying no to the things that don't make you happy or don't serve you. And even people who might be listening to this because they found our podcast through, you know, maybe not being happy in their career or in a relationship, and they find those difficult to get out of. Yeah. You know, just think about what your future self would say and how they would thank you for, you know, finding that and looking for the happiness in things. So yeah, like I think I mentioned it to you before that I saw a LinkedIn post, you know, where someone said success for me, it was broken down year by year, and like, you know, 10 years ago was getting out of bed in the morning, you know, and then success for me was being able to pay my rent, and then it came forward 10 years, like success now is you know, CEO of this business or whatever it is. Yeah. And that's exactly like, we're not placing that happiness comes from being a CEO or happiness comes from paying you rent. Like, you pick what that happiness is. Absolutely. But recognise it, and, you know, is, to me, a question I have now, it'd be really interesting for like our listeners to think about this, is happiness a better life measure than success? Because actually, I'm not going to feel successful when I'm out walking my dog. That's not the emotion that I'm thinking about or feeling, but it's happiness, and the happiness definitely brings me, you know, a lot more joy. And by the fact of being able to recognise that and recognise those feelings at work and the emotions and, you know, the power that work gives me as well. Yeah. And you can start to harness that every day. You've just made me think of a story a friend of mine told me. So back at law school where I started out, we all went on and into the world of corporate law and, you know, all sorts of stuff. And one of my friends from that time went to an American law firm in London. Right. And we kept in touch, and as you do, and I met with him maybe every 6 months, a year, something like that. So we weren't close, but we kept in touch with each other. And he told me an amazing story of how, so he's a trainee, so he's like apart from like being an apprentice, you're basically as a trainee in a law firm, you're at the bottom, right? This thing's a pyramid and you've got to work your way up. So he's there, and he's got a guy that's maybe got 15 years on him that's his supervisor. Right. They're in this room at 3 a.m. down in London, and this guy just starts crying. Oh my gosh. And and so I won't name anybody, but he was like, "What, you all right?" Is everything? And he's like, "What am I doing with my life?" And he started unpacking that, yes, he's got a £1 million house. Yes, he's on 300 grand a year. But at the end of the month, he has no money for himself because he's got the lifestyle. His kids are in private school. And he's like, I do not have any money for myself at the end of the month. Yeah. And you're like, so what are you doing it for? And if, you know what I mean? Because if you don't have that purpose driving you every day that gets you out of bed in the morning. Yeah. What are you, you know, and I kind of wish I was in the room, because I'd be saying, you need to think about where you're heading. Yeah. And actually, like, I think a lot of it is derived from adding things to your life that you might not necessarily need, and you're doing something because you're like, I'll just do it another year. I'll just do it 2 years. No, I'll stick it through. I was guilty of that in my last business. Yeah. In that relationship with those other people, going, I'm going to give it another year because I think I can make it work with them. No, I couldn't. Yeah. And that's like, it's really difficult. But if you're inherently unhappy with the work drivers, you've kind of got to look at it and go, well, what if I stripped it back? Yeah. And I think people struggle it's often easier to see the negatives than the positives. So some of the time people know, I know what's making me unhappy, but I don't know what would make me happy. And, you know, it comes back again in an earlier episode when we talk about mindset, but really getting yourself into that groove of, if I took all those things away, what's left, and where do I find that joy? And, you know, really, really searching for those. And, you know, for us both, I think I can speak on behalf of us both, because I know how we both talk about how we feel about this podcast, but like this is something that brings us joy, like coming and being able to talk about personal experiences with the aim to hopefully help others, and the feedback that we get from people.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's you've got to look for it, you know, like happiness won't just fall at your feet. You've got to be in the mindset of being open to feel happiness, to feel grateful for what you have, and then you start noticing it everywhere you go. You know, so I think it can be really powerful when people start harnessing that feeling of like search for the happy, basically.
Claire, I can't say any more to that. That is a great way to bring this to an end, I think, for this one.
So go away and search for the happy. So hope everyone's enjoyed that episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any ideas of topics you'd like us to cover, please let us know. We're also really hoping to get more voices on the podcast this year. You know, one of our aims was to celebrate northern businesses and people in the north, and showing that there's plenty of life and energy to be had out of here. So please get in touch if you're interested in being on, or if there's anyone that you'd want to recommend to come on as well. And we hope to see you in our next one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the North Star podcast. To find out more about us and find more episodes, please visit thenorthstarpodcast.co.uk. Thank you for listening.